Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your media and tech-related production questions every single day. Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia is our reader today. Alexander, what's our first question?
First question this morning is coming from Talalok Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina. What do you know about VOR for theatrical lighting design? Could it be used for production somehow? I can show how I use it.
I would love to find that out, Talalok. Tell us a little bit about that. This is VOR.
Yeah, so it's something that I came across about 4 months ago, maybe not quite 4 months, 3 months ago, because a young assistant lighting designer was working with the lighting designer on a project I was working on. I was the projection designer on it. And I walked by their table and I went, wait a minute, what is that? And what it does is it allows you to take a video feed of the show and overlay the light cues and other information onto it. And sometimes our process is very, very fast. And so having a recording with all of the light cues overlaid on it in real time when they happen, so that you can use that to go back and work on the light cues and look for problems and figure out when things were called. And it's just an incredible tool that I, had to just give them my money, unfortunately. And so,
was it a lot of money, or is it something that's affordable?
It's a subscription. You can do. There's a couple of different tiers of purchase. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it also can take a picture of every cue at every cue. So when the cue completes, it takes a screen or a capture of that video. Now I'm going to share with you what this looks like, and I want you to realize that it'll take anything, an iPhone, any kind of video camera, and it could be a good quality or a bad quality. And that's not the part that we're looking at here. But I was given permission to share this show that I did at Spoleto, and I'll show you kind of how this is used. Hopefully this shares through. Can you guys see that?
I'm seeing a black screen. There it goes. Just popped up. We're seeing the stage.
Right. So you see here on the bottom left-hand corner, it shows the cue number, the label on the cue, and the percentage that the cue is done. On the upper left-hand corner, you see the elapsed time since the last cue. And then you can put all kinds of other logos and all that, like the do not distribute that's up on the upper right-hand corner that obviously I asked
do not show on Zoom.
Yeah.
but we're cool. We're sensitive and we checked. We're okay.
So I'm going to assume we're not hearing any audio. So everybody confirm that.
That is correct.
Not
music.
Share the audio.
Yeah.
So what we have here is we have projection design, and you just saw a cue fire that went from 165 to 166. You see the cue moving through in timing with percentage of the cue, which just means that if I don't have the orchestra and I don't have the stage manager, and I can really look through and fine tune timing on a particular cue, and make sure that I can also check to make sure things are called. You can bring in multiple audio tracks, and you can also bring in multiple audio video tracks. So you could have potentially a video of the conductor, for example, and give that to the stage manager so that they can have a better time sort of practicing the call. And you could, it's not just lighting. The light board is connected to this program, not just light boards that can connect. It's also automation and certain projection design software and generic OSE. So there's a lot of things that could happen. I thought perhaps you could use this in a production, if you have an automated production that's using OSC commands, so they could see what commands are going and where things are, how long things are taking and things like that, as a sort of a RFI kind of thing. And so you can see that as things happen, we're getting those changes. I won't go over the top on this and take it too long, but I wanted to put it up in this space for people to think about. see how they could possibly use it inside of the more broadcast space.
So this is more in theater, but I can see that, yeah, broadcast, I can see it in certainly music performance and things like that. I mean, you probably use it for opera and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like opera, concerts, could be really, really, really interesting and useful.
Chris Fenwick has some thoughts to ask.
So, I have a question about in the lower left-hand corner, I think you said it was percentage done. So theoretically at 100%, it would reset to 0 and the queue number would fire and it would step up 1, correct?
Yeah, so, it would step up to the number that you're actually utilizing in that particular queue. Might not actually be, it might not be the next number. It might be 10 numbers away or a point number. Oh, but it's coming in, it's coming in from the lighting console. So it's getting that information and that percentage done information from the lighting console.
What determines the percentage done?
The lighting console is sending that percentage. So like when you hit go on Q75, that queue is set to, let's say, 4 seconds. And so it's rolling through that 4 seconds, and the percentage time is from 0 to 4 in seconds on that queue.
And so at 100%, it will go to the next. The
percentage done will stay at 100, and we'll see that number will stay up, that the queue that we're in, the number of the queue that we're in, and in the tier of purchase that I've purchased, the expensive one, it'll also take a picture at that completion, right? So then I can take all those images and put them in paperwork, put them in my queue list. And so if this show moves on, this show is moving from where it was, which is in Charleston, South Carolina, to Austin in 26, I'll have all that information and the place it was called and everything I can look at and in video and in imagery to not have to recall from memory what it is that I was doing.
Jason wanted to get in on this. Jason?
Yeah, I'm curious. So it's basically like a crossfade, right? It's going between one and the other, and that's the transition, right? That the 1 to 100, that's basically what it's doing. It's like crossfading two cameras, except it's two different lighting phases. Is that right?
Yeah, so sorry, now we're talking less about VOR and more about lighting. So in lighting, we have different states that we build, which are called queues, right? So if we have one single light bulb on stage and that light bulb is at full, that's one state. And let's call that Q1. And then I take that light bulb to 10%, and then I record Q2, and I say Q2 should have a time of 20 seconds. And when Q2 is executed, it takes 20 seconds for that light bulb to fade from 10% or from 100% to 10%.
Hey, Tlaloc, what's the communications protocol? Are we talking an Ethernet thing, or what is talking in the system?
We have to insert audio and video and try to make it as good as possible. Like I sent an email earlier on this show that I'm working on right now. Hey, do we have a front of house camera? Can I have some good audio? All that. They mostly said no. But then you bring in the network of your particular show. Of the light, the lighting network in my case, or if you're using automation, that would just be Ethernet network into the computer, and then you hook up to those particular. You can use MIDI show control. You can use OSC. You can use MIDI itself, not just MIDI show control, and you can lay it out the way you would like it with all the logos and all the branding that you would like. And it's super useful. It's being used a lot. VOR is being used a lot on Broadway right now.
Wow. Well, very cool. I did not know any of this was happening. I know Broadway shows have gotten so complex in terms of special effects and cues and God knows what all else that I can see the need for tools to help everyone manage it. And great to take a look inside of it. Let's go to our next question.
This one's coming from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Would you have any issues with storing a microSD card stacked with an Apple AirTag? I have a small velcro SD card holder that I want to use to swap out cards on a drone while in the field, and I would like to keep close close track of the recordings.
You know, I wouldn't have thought this was a problem, but I can see all these active devices. Jason Bache, can you help us out with some of the tech here?
Yeah, Roscoe, that will not at all interfere, but I will say the only time I've ever lost footage in the field, it was a micro SD card coming out of a drone. We absolutely knew what we were doing, and that didn't really matter anyway. So make sure you power the drone all the way down. But no, the AirTag will not interfere.
I remember one of the scariest days of my life is when somebody explained to me how a cosmic ray could hit a gate in a semiconductor and change the gate state. And I went, so there's always going to be a certain amount of backup, double backup, and take care, because you never know when something stray and weird's going to happen. Doesn't most of the time. So next question.
Andy Kokendover in Vieiro, Florida, USA. What is the benefit of Zoom Room's custom AV controller? Audio has to be managed separately with Dante. Why would someone choose this over ZoomISO?
Boy, you're out of my level of expertise, and nobody here today has raised it. Oh, wait a second. Now all of a sudden the world is full. Alexander Knight is going to help us out a little bit. Alexander?
I've never used it, but the only thing that I know is I'm pretty certain that Zoom Room's custom AV controller is their solution to sort of a ZoomISO type product that is going to be compatible with Windows. Because as you may know, or maybe you don't, Andy, but ZoomISO is a Mac OS specific application. So they needed a solution that was going to work on Windows, and I believe this is it.
There you go. Tlaloc.
Yeah, and there, on top of that, there are a lot of folks that really prefer the Zoom Rooms workflow for getting isolated audio and isolated video out of Zoom Rooms. But that was isolated to NDI, and a lot of folks really liked that on ZoomISO you could utilize SDI by way of the deck link in a Sonnet box, etc. And so what this Pro AV world does is it sort of opens up some of those additional features that were in ZoomISO that were not in Zoom Rooms to Zoom Rooms.
Jason Bache.
Zoom Rooms, I've used this in a conference room, and Zoom Rooms custom AV controller can do a whole bunch of other things. So, for example, I've used it to control HVAC in the room, and it's just designed to work together. And it all comes through on an iPad that has no other purpose and works really, really well. So, although it's a Venn diagram and there's a lot of overlap, the two are not the same.
Yeah, and I would suggest come and do a little bit of listen, maybe even put in a similar question on the Friday shows. We have a lot of network folks who are very used to handling this kind of stuff and are deep into things like ZoomISO. So just another suggestion. Next question.
This next question is coming from Serge Blondin in Montreal, Canada. I have a signal problem with Monoprice Blackbird 8x8 matrix using downscale output to my Atem Extreme ISO. Adding a dump HDMI splitter in between them makes the problem disappear.
That's interesting. Alexander Knight, any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if Serge is watching. I tried to post a question in chat there, but he didn't reply. So you didn't mention what exact issue you're encountering here, but it sounds like some kind of handshake issue. So I'd be curious as to what exactly you're experiencing. You want to make sure, obviously, that not just the resolution that your ATEM accepts 1080p, so obviously make sure it's 1080p if that's what you want, but also make sure that the frame rate is exactly matching. So if you go into your ATEM's control software settings and look at the system frame rate, if you're using a whole or fractional frame rate, just be mindful of that and just make sure whatever that is set to, that the output that is coming out of your HDMI matrix matches that exactly. And it should work unless there's something wrong with that matrix or there's something wrong with the HDMI cable that you're using. If you haven't swapped cables, also try that. So there's a bunch of things.
Jason?
Yeah, the Blackbirds can get a little bit weird when it comes to any sort of thing that isn't just simple AV distribution. I think you should look at the user's manual, and they all have this funky little serial/web interface. I bet you have an EDID handshake problem between the two, and something is grabbing onto the EDID and passing it through in a way that is showing up as copyrighted. It's going to be something along those lines. So I would look at the user's manual and try to get into the web interface and see if you can't troubleshoot from there.
Don't forget, we're always taking your questions. You can ask questions, chat about them, and vote on them in our Mocana Q&A system. Go to officehours.global/join. You get an email within a day or two, and once you've done that, you can vote on, discuss the questions, and talk in the show's live community. That's a lot of fun and is very active today. Next question.
This one's from Scott Gleason in Seattle, Washington, USA. For my church, the original, not Pro ATEM works fine with the HDMI distribution amplifier, but 3 different newer ATEM Pro models and Extreme ISO won't pass video through to the projectors. Help.
Alexander Knight, can you decode this?
Well, I don't know what model of projector you're running. It sounds like some kind of frame rate maybe mismatch. I know projectors can be sensitive about what they're actually receiving there. So just, again, check that. I don't know if the projector is set to like an auto negotiate for frame rate, if that's even an option. So again, like a lot of these types of issues tend to be something to do with you're trying to send it something that it doesn't accept. So whether it's the resolution or the frame rate or a combination of both, it could be. You'd have to look at the specs, see what the manufacturer supports for the HDMI input, and then kind of go from there. Because I doubt it's the ATEM. It's probably just a setting.
Tlaloc?
I suspect that this is a similar sort of response to the previous question about EDID. I think what might be happening is that when you set up your original non-Pro ATEM, that you set up the frame rate and resolution out to match what the projector is expecting, and you may not have already done that with your newer machines. So go into the output settings in the Blackmagic control software for the ATEM and see if those output settings are matching. That would be my best guess.
Next question.
Harold Williams in Portsmouth. What are the ways a blind individual can engage with a band? How might a deaf person appreciate a band's performance?
Fascinating questions, Harold. Tlaloc's going to help us out. Tlaloc?
Well, I think I understand the question. The biggest thing is a blind person that engages with the band by listening to the music that they make. I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing. And if you're talking about live performance and in a concert, I know that there are some visual descriptor kind of services that happen where you can have the person experience what's happening on stage and the lighting design and obviously that's what I care about. The lighting design, the scenic design, and the dancing and etc. be described to that person during the course of the piece. For a deaf person, I know that a lot of times the low frequencies can be felt by a deaf person, and they of course can see what's happening if they're not also blind. They can see what's happening on stage. So combining the low rumbles and the low bass with what they're seeing on stage, I think could be really engaging for that person.
And I have to admit, one of the most charming YouTube videos I ever watched was a young woman who was the ASL interpreter doing a hard rock band, and she was totally engaged. It was so much fun to see her signing essentially the lyrics, but with all the expressiveness that you would expect from a heavy metal head. And it was just a lovely thing to watch. So I know that the community of people who do interpretation and things like that for things, they're always thinking of their audience, thinking, how can I make this come alive for someone who might not have all the capabilities, but can certainly enjoy a great performance like that. So fun. Next question.
Matt Cool in Montreal, California, or sorry, that's probably Montreal, Canada. I was just asked to supply AV support for a small conference in Dubai. Has anyone worked there, and what advice would you have?
Long way away. Tlaloc.
So I have not worked there, but I carry suitcases really well. So let me know. But I just wanted to say that I've watched a lot of the Discord chatter go by about people getting gigs in Dubai inside of our community. So please, if you're not part of the Discord, go to officehours.global and get into the Discord. And if you ask this question in the I need help section, I'm sure someone can give you a really good and detailed answer. And I apologize, Bill, for raising my hand, even though I haven't been to Dubai.
No, that's all right. Any experience helps. And I was just thinking, Alex, who travels extensively and has traveled over his career would be a great person to ask this to. Alex, unfortunately, has Thursday commitment today and couldn't be here. But if you come back to any of the shows, hold on to your question or write it down. I don't think this is a QR code question, so we don't save it. That means that it may get sent back to you in your notes at the end of this. If so, bring it back to a day when at least Alex, I know, travels so much and has traveled so much that he tends to be very informed about these kind of things. So just a suggestion. Next question.
This one's from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. What are some good but not lavish pad replacements for the Sony MDR-7506s? Mine are all crumbled and tattered.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has a pair of 7506s that you've had for more than maybe 6-7 years that you haven't had that shedding of stuff off of the headphone pads. Alexander Knight, dive in.
Yeah, you can find, if you're not going to buy the OEM Sony pads, I don't even know if they still make them, but you can just buy, if you just go to Amazon and type in Sony MDR-7506 pads, you will find tons of knockoff replacements for like $20 for a pair. You can see I just went to Amazon here and just typed that in. So there's lots of options for replacement pads of varying qualities. You'd have to probably order a couple and see which one's better. But the better thing to do, in my opinion, is just buy better headphones. There's no low end and the crispy top end. Like, please stop using these 75s. They're so overrated. I don't like Bayer Dynamic DT770s, closed backs. They're just so much more well balanced.
I'm going to push back a little bit because I've been using them for so long. I'll talk about the pads first. It's an interesting system. It has a very thin membrane that goes into a slot on the headphone cups, but they have been so popular for so long that there are tons of really good solutions. I have a pair of turquoise ones that I'm going to switch out a pair of headphones because my wife wanted something that was a little cooler than just the black ones. I agree with Alexander in the fact that these are not, I want to listen to classical music all day long, so I should buy these headphones. That's never been their purpose. I saw them so much in production because they do have a pretty pronounced presence peak up in the area of human speech. And the reason I love them and have gotten so accustomed to them over the years is if I'm listening to a performance, particularly somebody on microphone, it's the kind of headphone that'll reveal problems like popped P's and splashy S's and stuff like that. And to me, that is more important. I'm not listening to music while I'm working most of the time. I'm monitoring human speech for clarity. And 7506s do a really good job of that. And I think that's one of the reasons you see so many pairs out there. Yes, there are better headphones for sure. But for $100 workhorse and something that you can get repaired in almost every major city in the world and has parts still after they've been going for 20 years, they have a great place in the production industry. I think that's why you see so many of them. But anyway, horses for courses. Next question.
This one comes from Khaled Al-Jumaima in Hassa, Saudi Arabia. 10-inch mini rack, any projects come in mind? And there's a link to YouTube.
Oh, boy, it's so hard to tell somebody else what kind of projects. I mean, I'm at a loss to figure out how to suggest somebody else. There are lots of projects in these communities, the DIY people, and I'm not even sure that I know particular websites where you could go and talk to people about what kind of project would be appropriate. So I'm going to be a little bit at a loss. Sorry about that. Oh, Jason has some thoughts.
Need to reach out to Jonas in Discord. He has raved about a 10-inch mini rack that he has a whole bunch of Raspberry Pis directly over his shoulder, more than once on camera. He has done some really neat stuff with it. He uses it, I think, for onboarding or for checking space comps. I don't remember exactly, but a whole bunch of Raspberry Pis that would otherwise be messy or just, flawlessly assembled on his back shelf. So yeah, I would check with him.
There you go. Perfect use. Next question.
Annie Kokenova in Viera, Florida, USA. Infocomm rumor, 15-inch Elgato Prompter coming. Thoughts?
Doesn't surprise me. Jason?
Not impossible. And, they'll announce it and maybe 6 months later you'll be able to buy it. But, great.
The prompter space has exploded over the past 5 years, in my opinion. It used to be that it was a specialist tool, reasonably expensive, and only people in video or had to do a lot of on-camera interviews and things like that used teleprompters. Now, because so many people are content creators, open quote, close quote, it's a general purpose thing, and Amazon and the rest of those things are just chock full of beam splitter glass and teleprompter setups. I actually was surprised when I bought the one that I'm looking at right now. I was able to get something for under $100 that had serviceable beam splitter glass, as long as I got a bright enough reversing monitor so that I could use it in the teleprompter. And I found one from Lilliput, I think it costs more than the actual prompter rig. But this prompter rig is made out of plastic. It is not designed to be traveled with or to be set up and torn down. But for the kind of use I'm using it for, to sit at a desk every day and have an eye-line prompter that I can throw notes up, for example, the opening of this show, and get it accomplished every day really cheaply. There's just so much option out there. The professionals and people like Courtney, who has patents in the teleprompter world, will tell you that for large-scale professional use, these little ones don't do the job. But for personal computing, personal video telepresence and things like that, you can get a lot for a little now. Tlaloc, you wanted to get in on this?
Just having experience working with Tony on conversation with Tony Mobley and having sort of to find this fine line in teleprompter size between not big enough to read things easily versus to be looking all over the place to your different points in your stage that takes you outside of where the actual lens is. And I think it's different for different studios and for different readers and different people and the way that they use their world. If you get way too big, it's like not having a teleprompter at all.
Yeah. And we're now in the world where we're using teleprompter for different things. When I started in my career, it was always just text. It used to be green text on a black background, and then we got all sorts of different colors. Now I'm using a teleprompter essentially to reflect the panel back to me so I can keep my eye on who might be interested in answering a question and things like that. And the idea of putting other signals into a teleprompter glass arrangement is something that a lot of people do all the time. So it's become a more general purpose thing, I think, than it used to be. At least it has in my practice. Let's see. Yeah, let's just go to the next question. Next question.
All right, this one's from Harold Williams in Portsmouth. I have a new M4 Pro Mac Mini ready to install an encoder. Is it ready?
Alexander Knight, do you know anything about this?
Well, congratulations, because that's an amazing computer. I'm not sure what encoder you're going to be installing there. I'm assuming this is software-based. It's an amazing computer. Sequoia is finally starting to mature after a year. I would have said last year it wasn't ready, but now with there being so many bug fixes, it's funny, like macOS 15.5 just came out, and I was looking at the release notes, and Apple is still fixing core audio bugs in their OS. Like there's a lot of really, really bad bugs being fixed. But I'd finally say at this point now, if the software vendor that you're using officially supports macOS Sequoia, I'd say probably now is a pretty good time to adopt it. But I would test it thoroughly. Obviously, do your test, stress test the computer, make sure. But as far as your system resources are concerned, even just the basic M4 Mac Mini is incredible. Like I'm doing a production of my podcast with it, with lots of sources, graphics, live streaming out to 4K, and it's 40% utilization. So I think you're going to have a good time with that computer.
A lot of capacity there. Hey, don't forget, we're doing other shows, and Thursday night, tonight, is one of those extra shows, The Rundown. David Paskin is going to be hosting a panel that takes a deep dive into the why behind the latest tech that's reshaping our world. I've been on his show a couple of times, and it is just a great chat. So that's tonight, I think, 6 p.m. Pacific time, for those of you who are interested. The Rundown. Next question.
This one's coming from Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas. How does this pro photographer safely put his subjects, himself, and even his camera on fire to go viral on Insta?
Somebody else lighting it. Well, let's take a look. Jason, do you have something for us?
I'm not sure what you call viral, but the first time I saw this, I thought, oh, this is terrible. Like, he didn't expose right. He needed an ND filter. Like, he could have done that better. But, okay. The way I've done this in the past is with rubber cement. And that works pretty well. You've got maybe a second before anything heats up. You could also do it with sterno, but it's a terrible idea. I've always used rubber cement for this kind of effect.
And we are not recommending you light anything on fire close to your body. That's just an official show position. I think it's an official human position. If you studied this and have all the insurance in the world and it's only yourself, well, go for it. Have fun. Do you. But we do not appreciate that. And in fact, I just saw Tlaloc raise his hand to me. He may talk a little about pyro in the real world of shows.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of pyro, it's a matter of control, time, and heat, right? I mean, if you know you can control where the flames will go, and you know that you can control how much heat is transferred to things you don't want it transferred to in the time that you're trying to do it, then you can make these things be safe. But a lot of training is necessary, and more and more now in theaters, for example, there are quite a few rules and regulations regarding these kinds of things that just it's no longer allowed. I mean, in a lot of theaters, you can't even have a candle. So, things have changed a lot.
Well, we've seen some of those tragedies, like the nightclub fires, where some small band is doing pyro on stage and they don't do it intelligently, and there have been literally scores of deaths and casualties. So, anytime you're working in a public venue and you're working with any kind of fire, I know even for our beer festivals that I used to, I was a chairman of a charity that had to do, that's at one of our fundraisers, and I know the fire marshal used to come out, and that's the one person with the ability to just say, we're stopping you right now, and the police department will back me up. It is dangerous. And so it's great to see all these things, but it's very much like a lot of the risky things that draw eyeballs on the internet done without training, without preparation, without care can be very dangerous. So be careful. That's all. Next question.
Aaron Husledge in Durham, North Carolina, USA. Apparently, Apple did some streaming magic with their trailer for F1, adding haptic elements to make your phone shake. Thoughts on integrating video streaming with device hardware?
It's like Shake-A-Vision in the theaters. Jason Bache?
And just like Shake-A-Vision, I thought, what was the point of this? But it is, okay, I'll break it down. It is pretty cool. So if you go into it, and I'm guessing this only worked in Safari, but apparently you can trigger the haptic engine directly from iPad or from iPhone OS. And it is relatively easy, and you could actually roll it into an HLS stream, which is pretty clever, assuming that you can't do it live, I assume, and it needs to be very specifically time-coded. Neat show-off, but not your everyday fare.
Yeah, I think I was 12 years old when a friend of my brothers took us to the quarter midget racers in a track in Phoenix. And I got to tell you, standing next to the chain link fence and listening and feeling those little crazy cars go by left an impression on me that lasts to this day. I can only imagine, having never been trackside at a Formula One race, the level of sound, fury, vibration, and anything else that's going on there. It's got to be pretty intense.
And just so we're clear, what Bill's talking about is not a pejorative for a little person. It's actually the name for the circuit. Yes.
Yeah. And it tends to be younger people because they're small but very powerful, very loud cars going very fast around a track and tossing a lot of dirt up from those spinning rear wheels. And we laughed and giggled hysterically at age, I think, 10 or 12 when we went to the races. Never forgot it. Next question.
Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Orlando, Florida is asking, what's the biggest mistake you've seen or made in live sound, and what did you learn from it?
Tlaloc's going to start us off here. Tlaloc?
Okay. So When I was 17 years old, I had my first professional gig at a theater, and it was sound designer. And I had very little knowledge of what it was that I was doing. As Mickey could tell you, that's probably still the case. But I did do, it was Jesus Christ Superstar, so there were a lot of wireless mics, and I was trying to run them. They were not good quality. There was a lot of interference, and I cared deeply about doing the best job that I could do. Had a lot of trouble through first few rehearsals, and then got it to some semblance of okay by the penultimate rehearsal. And, it had to do with all kinds of settings on the console and all kinds of just getting it right. And what I did that was a huge mistake is this was before digital mixers. So I didn't write down every setting that I had. And when I got back into the theater the next day, all of the adults in the company had a party, and they wanted to use the console for music. So they changed all the settings in the music, and I found a glass of wine on the console. So I was fit to be tied. I was super angry, and I went to the head of the company and read him the riot act at 17. So what are you going to do?
Ballsy. Well done. You were right. One tilted glass of wine into a console and everything stops. Alexander Knight.
Well, like all new audio engineers, when you first start out, I always hear similar stories, and it's kind of similar for me too. A lot of experienced engineers always kind of share the same story. How, the engineer was the main person doing front of house mixing was sick that night, and they kind of just throw you in the fire. Hey, you got to mix the band tonight. There's no one else to do it. So you got to figure things out, and it's the same thing, over EQing or not understanding EQ properly, and also gain staging improperly. So, things can't be heard. Learning how to balance the mix properly, learning how to carve space for everyone in the band to make sure everything is heard, and obviously focusing on the vocal to make sure that is heard properly. So, really mainly understanding how to utilize high pass and low pass filters properly. Once I figured that out, you can really make things sound pretty good pretty quickly just by using those two techniques, because there's a lot of junk in low end frequencies that you just don't need in the human voice that really cause a lot of problems with muddiness and creating feedback. So once you know those two, it makes a big difference.
Next question.
This one is coming from Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona, USA. How do you pull the best out of an inexperienced interviewee? We had a guest on our show recently who was on Wi-Fi, responded to questions slow, and the pace of the show was much slower. How do you bring the best out of your guests?
Great question. Tony Mobley, who does a lot of interviewing, is going to help you out here. Tony?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that if at all possible, if you can, have a session with that potential guest prior to the actual show. If that's possible, that's what you want to do. One of the things that I've gleaned from office hours, and particularly Alex Lindsay in terms of hosting, is that you recognize that you are an advocate for your guests, but most importantly, you're an advocate for your audience. And so it is your job to get the best out of both, for both situations. And so the main thing that I would say is that you want to make sure that you are present for your guests. And when I say present, what I mean by that is that you are tuned in to their responses, and you are an advocate for making them feel comfortable so that where they may be not as responsive in the beginning, by the end of the conversation is free flowing. And that's what I've experienced.
Great suggestions. Alexander Knight.
Yeah, I just to build on what Tony's saying, prep is definitely important. Also, sometimes doing a pre-interview. It's nice if you have staff, like if you have like a producer that can kind of get that person in, do tech checks early, do like a pre-interview to try to learn a little bit more about them, to also let you know, give you advanced warning of how that person kind of conducts themselves as well. But everything Tony said, being present is also super important. And if you're comfortable with yourself too, knowing when to step in and fill the gaps too, because sometimes like dead air, nobody likes that. It's super awkward. So, you can really hear the difference when you have an interviewer who's experienced, who's done interviewing a lot, especially someone who has worked in radio for a long time, and they have no problem waxing poetic and filling the gaps. They usually have a hard time not talking. So, that really helps. And, it takes practice. And sometimes the reality is that you just have not a fantastic guest. And so there are certain things, coming to that realization, that accepting the fact that there are certain things that are out of your control. And sometimes you just don't have a great guest, and there's not much you can do about that.
Chris Fenwick.
Hey, Jack. I think specifically what you're talking about, Jack, is that you had a bad connection. The bad connection made responses and back and forth awkward. I get that. I think it's important that you are willing to shift gears quickly and say, oh, we have a bad connection. I can't interject quickly. We're going to have to deal with this as best we can, as best as the technology. And I think that's what Jack was actually talking about. In regards to this pre-interview thing, I'm going to buck the trend. I hate a pre-interview. I hate a pre-interview. I don't want to know anything about somebody before I interview them. I really don't, because you have to think that the audience doesn't either. And if you've had a conversation with somebody before you have the conversation with somebody, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to forget what you talked about before. And to me, there's nothing more contrived than like, oh, why don't you tell me that story, Bill? That was really fun. I hate it when TV personalities do that. And if the audience is going to be meeting this person for the first time rather, I really think you should too. And if you can't handle it, maybe you're not good at doing interviews. But I've done hundreds of interviews exactly like that. And I just think it makes a better interview. It's more genuine. It's more real.
Tony Mobley.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for me, the most important thing is that you don't leave the person out there dangling. So if you have to push the conversation for them, then do that. But don't leave them out there hanging. So you definitely don't want to do that.
Yeah, my experience I've done a few hundred interviews too, is that there's two things that I always think about. The first thing is engagement with the person. I've always had a hand signal for a camera operator to start the interview, because what I want to do is figure out who this person is and get engaged with them. I want to find whatever they're passionate about, get them starting to talk about that first, because that'll get the energy level high. If they are slow and set back, then I'm going to actually increase my energy a little bit in my questions to try to excite them a little bit. And the other thing is that really engagement to me is about 90% of that. And we've heard off and on here, when you're on the air, be yourself, only plus 10%. And then I've heard Alex, I think the other day, said plus 25%. You do want to elevate energy. It looks good on video. So that's part of my getting into the interview, is to try to help the guest elevate their energy. And I often do that by finding something they're passionate about, and then really engaging, and then starting to get really excited about what they're passionate about. Then when suddenly we're in the interview, they carry that energy into it. All just tricks. It's a skill that takes a long time to master. And the people who are really good at it should be lauded. It's a tough thing. Next question.
This one is coming from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Lighting question on Dancing with the Stars. The floor displays detailed graphics. Are these projections from above, or is the floor a type of video screen? If it's a screen, is that kind of surface really suitable for dancers?
Tlaloc?
So I'm not entirely sure about Dancing with the Stars. It's not something I watch, but this is done in both ways. This is done with projections from above, and you can tell because you will always see a shadow of the projection. If you'll see a shadow of the projection with the people in it, and you would see projections on them if they're not completely lit in a bright way. So very likely what you're looking at is a screen below, and what they do is they layer it with plexi, and they tend to probably put a little bit of a texture on it so it's not too slippery, and they may also put a spring in it so that it has a little bit of give for the dancers, so they don't break their legs and their knees and their ankles.
Next question.
This one is a QR code question from Reina Doppelpopoulos in Situate. What are the pictures Bill was talking about before the show? It sounded cool, but wasn't good radio, and we'd like to share the experience. Thank you.
And I apologize, Rena. We tend to talk just among the panel and things like that before the show, and I had just seen something come up on my screen. I think it was that Apple thing where it throws up a picture from the past, and it was one of my pictures from Comic-Con. So here, I'm gonna toss you to a rolling history of some of the things. This is just whatever Apple is picking as some of my shots from Comic-Con 2024. I really love working it because it's just people put a lot of time and effort into building these costumes. They are stunning in the level of creativity. And, I've discovered that because I like being at Comic-Con and because I like the fact that these people put so much time, I would get a theme every year. One of the things I look for is full face makeup. I want somebody who looks like they've spent a lot of time in a seat working on their look for Comic-Con. And it really helps me as a photographer because I don't have to look at everybody. There's so much visual. Oh my God, there's 100,000 people and they're all dressed up. But if I look for something like I want facial makeup, I can pull people out of the crowd. I can take them to an area where I think they will look great and take pictures based on that. And so that hopefully this is run around at least once, and so you'll have a chance to see some of the shots that I was thinking about when that Green Goddess photo of Poison Ivy came up, and it was on my feed, and I thought, oh man, I just remember taking that. It was so much fun, and I felt like it made me a better photographer because I was so happy when I got that one little palm tree out at the edge and was able to take the cosplayer out there and get something I think that was a little bit special because of that. Next question.
This one's coming from Tony Mobley, Noonan, Georgia, here on the panel. Is there a way to add a Raspberry Pi, I just dropped my phone, to my setup with all ATEM Pro ports, all full?
Look.
Well, I think it's that question you always have to ask yourself. Why? What do you want to play out on that? Do you have stuff to play out on the play out B? Is that why you want to do that? Do you want to have a PC or a Linux computer that you can show on screen? What's the purpose of it? And that's, I think, your first question. The second question is whether you can get something out without going in an HDMI. And I don't think that Playout B does that yet in terms of NDI. And so the answer is no. No, you would probably need a bigger ATEM.
Tony Mobley?
Yes, I know I need a bigger ATEM. I know that I would fill up any, no matter what the ports were, I would fill them up with something. But the rationale was that I wanted to use it primarily for the house of worship to be able to take some of the load off of my computers that I'm using. I have two machines that are basically tied up for the house of worship, and I'd like to shift maybe some of what I'm doing to a Raspberry Pi or a lesser device. That was the rationale. But I recognize that another larger ATEM would probably be the best solution.
Hey, if you value what we do here, there are a few ways you can help. You can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's really simple and just a click. You can volunteer at officehours.global volunteer, officehours.global/volunteer. Let me get that right. And you can become part of the team that makes all this possible, or you can simply donate. If you'd like to contribute, we are a 501c3. That's officehours.global/donate. Thank you. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's asking, Xcode 26 will be including AI-assisted development, Swift Assist. Do you think that will dilute the value of courses like CodeWithChris?
Ooh, interesting question. Jason Bache, what do you think?
I mean, the short answer is no. We've had autocomplete for a very long time in Xcode, and if you're really all about understanding the frameworks and the whole part of coding, you're not going to lose anything. You're not going to lose the value for learning quickly the various parts of it with ChatGPT. This is the link that he went to. And no, I mean, just straight up, if you're going to use ChatGPT to basically just vibe code and throw, if you're throwing spaghetti at the wall, you're not wanting to learn code. If you do want to learn code, then a course is always valuable. This is one of these things where the two are not mutually exclusive.
Alexander Knight.
Apple is not trying to replace developers. What they're trying to do is give people tools and functionality that will help someone who already knows mostly what they're doing to just be more efficient. You still need to learn the basic foundational stuff.
Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Only a handful of months after it premiered on iOS, Photoshop hits Android devices with a range of features that are currently free while it's in beta. What device would you use this on?
Interesting. I don't really use Android or Photoshop, to be honest with you. But my leeriness is about this. Adobe and Photoshop, they're pretty much a subscription company now. And so I would be just, before you put a lot of content into one of those systems, just make sure you're comfortable with that. Because like many of the things we all do now, we find ourselves paying for something monthly forever, whether or not we use it on a particular thing. And I'm trying to get I'm not doing a great job of keeping out of that system as I used to think I would like to, but I am careful now about subscription things or things that can turn into subscriptions. And I think because it's such a powerful business model for companies, they promote them a lot with free subscriptions. Just do this for a year or do this for a month or 6 months or 3 months, knowing that a lot of people just click on it, get excited about it, then forget about it. And the next thing you know, you're dribbling money out of your life every month for the rest of your life. And I have some friends who literally, one person who was on a board with me years ago passed away, I think 15 years ago. And I'm still seeing auto replies and stuff like that. And I think his account is still going. And I don't know the family anymore. And I don't know how to reach them, but I think they're probably still getting charged for things. That scares me. That's just my personal thing. Next question.
This one's from Conrad in Atlanta. Yesterday, we asked how to auto-switch camera angles by looking at one of the multicams. The app that easily and cheaply does this is YourDirectorAI.
All right. Well, hopefully, Conrad, you've had some experience with that. And if you like it, great. If other people are looking for something that will auto-switch, I know there's a lot of AI activity in that. So I don't know anything about this particular product, and I haven't heard anybody mention it on the show. So maybe we'll keep it on our radar from this point on. Thanks for the question. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Have you ever had a contract mistake that cost you big? Apple is facing a $1 billion loss in the EU.
Yeah, they're one of the few companies that could probably pay that if they needed to. I have not heard this particular one. I will say contracts are funny. If you don't do a lot of them, there's so many gotchas and traps and things like that. You can read them as much as you want, but if you're facing, as I have done a couple of times in my career, I'm working with a large company and they propose a contract. It's very hard to push back against somebody who has teams of lawyers or a floor in a law firm working on their side, and you're just trying to do it on your own. The only thing I ever really learned about contracts and about negotiating is I was once in a process, and one of my contacts at a big company had suggested we do a series of videos. And at that point, most of the videos, it was early in my career, were in the like maybe $10,000, $15,000 zones. And so they came up with the number, I think right about 10,000. And we were doing 4 or 5 videos. And I thought, well, can I do 4 or 5 videos? I guess I could cut this back. And I didn't say anything for a minute in negotiation. And then the woman I was working with on the other side of the thing said the word that made me the happiest of my life. She said the word each. And I went, oh, yeah, I think I can probably pull that off. So sometimes when it comes to contracts, the less said, the better. Try to fit in, try to make relationships with the people that you're being commissioned to do work for. Because if you have a relationship, sometimes they will do really well by you. Tlaloc has a note on this.
I'm going to do this really quickly. Just wanted to jump in and say, I have to think a lot about this in my contracting with for my freelancing, and I spoke a little bit about this at the beginning of the show. Try to put in right of first refusals if the production is going to be repeated, and protect myself going down the future so that I can earn on it if it continues on. I've had directors tell me, "Well, that's my intellectual property too," and I said, "Well, get a better contract." Quite literally said that to one director.
It is important. If you're going to be in business, understanding the contractual part of it and understanding the legal ramifications on the rest of that is pretty mission critical. It's really easy to get taken advantage of in these situations if you don't have any experience in them. Next question.
This one's from Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas. When will we realistically get to use the new 26 series of OSes and revs coming from Apple? Apple's various OSes are going to pivot to being named for the year after their release rather than simply by their version number.
Jason Beish.
You know how you can buy next year's car this year so that you've got a few of those beautiful months where you're driving next year's car? This fall, Paul. This fall.
Tlaloc.
I have it on my iPhone now. That's all I can say.
There you go. I was going to say also, revs and development and releases are a funny thing. They go out into alpha for a certain select group of people, then they go into beta. And it's not really until they get out in the wild that you really find out whether there are any gotchas. I think that's why there's always those beta or those incremental updates as soon as a piece of software is released. They're very complicated. I think I applaud them for switching to the year thing because, boy, it was hard to know 10.6.7.3.2 is the current. Really? And so now hopefully we'll get some consistency of knowing at what era the software that I'm loading into my machine was. Chris Van Wyck, you wanted to get in on this?
Yeah, I think we're still going to get point releases. There'll be updates and fixes and whatnot, bears on my. I would argue, and I totally get the car thing, Jason. Sure, we're shopping for a 2026 Ford right now, but I think WWDC should be called 26. It should be called for the year that the software is going to be released or mostly used. I think this should have been WWDC 26, talking about all the 26 releases.
Interesting.
Am I wrong?
Tony Mobley?
I agree with that. I agree
Settled.
with what
Let's
Chris
change
just
it.
said. So,
I will say that, interesting, I think we think that WWDC has become like the keynote, but it is a little different. Having been to it a couple of times, I will say that WWDC is for developers. Developers as a group must work to the future. They are creating stuff that is not going to be public for 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, in some cases, some of those developers. So their conclave is really not the same kind of stuff. I was actually a little surprised. I think what Apple was trying to do was say to the developers, here's how we're going to do this going forward. We're not going to change anything that's here now, but when your products finally hit the streets in 3 months, 5 months, next year, whatever, this is the new naming convention going forward. Tony, did I cut you off? Did you say everything you wanted to say?
yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm using 26 the iPad version, and I am amazed. It seems like it is a revolutionary OS for the iPad. It does, in my opinion, move it closer to being Mac-like. And I can see in the future where some people will be able to forego getting a Mac and be able to do everything that they need. And I'm talking about regular people. I'm not talking about office hours people. But I mean, it is really a game changer. I am pleasantly delighted in all of the great features and the things that it does, and the ability to customize it in a way that is very, very close to being like a Mac. And I think that there are a lot of people that's going to be extremely happy about what it does now.
I'm going to let you have the last word. It is the top of the hour. Thank you all for coming to Office Hours again and helping us do this. Thank you, panelists. An extra thank you today, particularly to all of you who decided to join us. It was great to see faces we haven't seen in a while. Don't forget, if you had questions in the question queue, if they came in by the QR code, they will be persistent and will roll over. If you had regular questions, they'll be sent back into your notes field so you can pull them back for tomorrow's show. Our clock traversal today. Oh, well, I hadn't finished saying the thank yous, and I do not want to leave anybody out because it is incredible how much effort goes in that you don't see to the back end of this. So I mentioned panelists, but also those of you who put questions into the show, our producers. Thank you so much for all of your questions. And that not unsung, but should be sung about often group, our back-end technologists who keep this show on the air. Thank you so very, very much for doing what you do every single day and getting us on the web, and to all of our audiences around the world. Thank you so very much. Clock traversal today, 41,000 miles. That is 65,000 kilometers. If you had to travel around and get all these answers to all these questions, that is 321 million bananas for scale. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you all tomorrow. And don't forget, tonight, the rundown.
Is it the rundown or extra hours?
No, rundown. It's Thursday. It's the rundown.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's been gone for too long. Yeah.
Your sidereal clock is messed up.
So now I got to figure out how to not have black frames in office hours, and then maybe I can come back next Thursday, Bill.
Oh, I would love to have you. It's great. And maybe we can start talking about, I love the bringing of the theatrical stuff into that. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
I dubbed the Thursday Theater Day.
Oh, he says there's a lot of theater people in the event chat. That's great to hear. Did you tweet about this, Tlaloc? Did you send something out to your...
No.
No? Well, why not? No, I'm just kidding. It's just great to have you here. Good to see you.
Awesome. Well, it was good to see everyone.
See you all tomorrow.